silence. There's a power in silence. I don't know if any of y'all feel that. Certainly when it's voluntary, there is a power in silence. It speaks thunderously. There's also a power, conversely, in silence when it's forced upon individuals involuntarily. Silence is the appropriate way, and indeed I'd posit the perfect way to begin a Day of Remembrance ceremony. Silence is actually kind of a little unusual in the sense that you get both the power from it and also the loss from it. Silence is what we use every time there is a memorial service. It's common in Western culture. We offer that moment of silence. And lest we all forget, the Transgender Day of Remembrance is a memorial service. It's a collective memorial service put on by the community, the transgender community, every year to remember the victims of murder. Murder born of bias, murder born of phobia, and murder born of hate. We've lost 117 victims over the course of the past 12 months since the previous November 20th. Think about that for a second. That moment of silence that we afford conveys respect to the families, but it also gives us all time to pause and reflect, to reflect on what this individual's life meant to their family, what their life meant to their friends, what their life meant to all those around them, how it impacted everyone around them. And indeed, it gives us pause, even if we don't know the victim, for that moment of mortality. Not only their mortality, but our own. We all know that there, but for the grace of God, that could have been any one of us. We're all very fortunate to actually be here tonight. The people that we're memorializing, I'm sure had no clue that they would be on this list this year, but they are not here. I know it's a solemn occasion, and we've had people that have had different points of view, that wanted to do something a little bit lighter, that wanted, I actually had a well-known trans activist mention not only to me but to others that we needed to move it to a different date in a warmer time of year to be a little bit more lighthearted, something a little bit more celebratory, celebrate their life. And I just could not agree with that. And maybe it's just me, maybe I just haven't found a reason to actually see her side of this. But ultimately, we're not here to celebrate. This is a wake. We don't celebrate the murder victims in Darfur. We don't celebrate 9/11. We don't celebrate the Holocaust. Why would we celebrate the murders within our own community? I just find very mixed signals in that. I cannot agree with that. Maybe it's just me, but I just don't see the reason for changing the solemnity of this occasion. Indeed, there are people that actually want to opportunize on this as well. There are well-known organizations that would love to have their name on and are actively involved in trying to utilize this as a tool, if you will, for their own purposes. Every year it's automatic press, every year it's automatic great public relations, and it's also something that they foresee as even being a potential for fundraising. But this is not anything that was begun by these large organizations or by these folks that, sought opportunity. This was begun back in 1998 after the death of Rita Hester. It was done basically by the grassroots, literally. The people on the listserv of the old gazebo list, speaking to Gwen Smith, saying, how many times do we have to go through this? How many times do we have to suffer through another one of our community members' deaths? And how many times do we have to go through this knowing that we have no recourse, or at least very little? We don't have the same resources afforded to this from law enforcement the way we do with other crimes in similar situations. And indeed, Rita Hester's death in Massachusetts was very symbolic in the sense that she is one of those unsolved hate murders, murdered simply because of who she is. Now, her murder was on November 28th, 1998. The following year, with all the suggestions from the people on the listserv, Gwen decided to actually put together the very first Day of Remembrance ceremony in San Francisco. And a similar ceremony took place in Boston, the home of Rita Hester. Over the course of the years, we've moved that from November 28th to November 20th, and again for good reason. Number one, the conflict occasionally with Thanksgiving holiday, but also November 20th is another significant date, inasmuch as Chanel Pickett, also from Boston, was murdered on that particular date. And she, again, is also symbolic of the other side of this coin. Someone who actually had her killer, her murderer, arrested almost immediately. And in her case, thanks to the jury and thanks to the defense lawyer, the judge's hands were tied. The jury came back with a conviction of assault. He was sentenced for the murder of Chanel Pickett for the maximum. And the judge actually spoke to him and said, you had better kiss the ground that your defense attorney walks on, because all I can sentence you to is 2 years, but you should be getting much, much more. This is how much a transgender life was worth.